In this episode of the Motor City Hypnotist Podcast, we're going to talk about psychoanalysis. What is it? Where did it come from? Does it really work? And also, as usual, we're going to be giving away a free hypnosis guide. Stay tuned.
Great heavens! What kind of radio show is this?
Get ready for the Motor City Hypnotist, David R. Wright, originating from the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan. He has hypnotized thousands of people from all over the United States. David R. Wright has been featured on news outlets all across the country and is the clinical director of an outpatient mental health and hypnosis clinic located just south of Detroit, where he helps people daily using the power of hypnosis. Welcome, the Motor City Hypnotist, David R. Wright.
What's going on, people? It is David Wright here, the Motor City Hypnotist. We're back with another episode of the Motor City Hypnotist Podcast. Glad to have you with me. Glad you're listening along. We are here in the Podcast Detroit Northville studios. As usual, with me is Matt.
Hey, I'm back.
Who's sitting at the table with me. And everybody can say hello to Declan. He's actually interning for us and running the board.
Yeah, Declan's good people.
Yeah.
He's actually he's a junior in high school. He actually wants to learn. He wants to get into voice acting.
That's fantastic.
So he's trying to learn some technology over here.
Absolutely.
So he's kicking my butt with it.
Yeah,
so.
he's just sitting there in the background.
Da-da-da-da, like this in the background. What the fuck is it with you?
No, just kidding, Declan. We're having fun. So let me tell you where you can find me. I was going to say my podcast, but you're listening to that. My website is motorcityhypnotist.com. On that website, you'll find my podcast page, my store, and all kinds of other cool stuff on there. So take a look. You can find me on social media on Facebook, YouTube at Motor City Hypnotist, and also on Twitter and Instagram, Motor City Hypno. And I am also on Patreon. Patreon is a creator site where listeners and fans of shows can provide financial support. So check that out. Take a look at that for me. And it's a minimal expense. It just helps us to run the show and give you good content and keep things going. And you get kind of cool stuff too. As a contributor on the site, you'll get, depending on the level you choose, you can get coffee mug, T-shirts, early access to the podcast, and also a shout-out or some kind of promotion if you wanted to push something on the show. And as usual, wherever you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. That would help me out tremendously, whether it's Apple, whether it's Spotify, whether it's wherever. If you're listening and you like the show, please give it a rating, subscribe, and leave a review. That would help me out very much. And as usual, on every episode, I give away a free hypnosis guide. And I may have mentioned it on last episode, but I also do have a free hypnosis recording that I've been putting in the show notes that is still available. So if you happen to be suffering from insomnia or difficulty sleeping, I've been offering this free hypnosis for insomnia download for the last probably 4 or 5 shows. So I will leave that link in the show notes as well. So you can just grab that, use it, and hopefully it's helpful for you. It is time for our winner of the week.
That's how winning is done.
All right. This winner of the week comes from Cincinnati, Ohio. And I'll just start to read the story here, and we can find out what exactly happened. When a stressed-out mom rolled up to McDonald's drive-thru to purchase a meal for her children, she realized with dismay on making her order that she left her purse at home. But the teenage server at the window didn't send her away. Wyatt Jones, who was the McDonald's worker, said he'd happily pay for the meal. Brittany Reed, who was the mother, was more than grateful. It had already been a long day at soccer practice with her 4- and 7-year-old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, long day at soccer practice with a 4- and 7-year-old.
I don't know what we're yelling about.
Right?
Exactly.
That's just follow the ball soccer is what that is.
Oh, man. Later that night, person tow, Brittany drove back to the McDonald's to give Wyatt his money back. Mm-hmm. but the Waynesville, Ohio local insisted the meal was on him, so he didn't want to take her money.
Good for him.
Even after she came back. So Brittany, who was the mother with the kids, wrote in a Facebook post, "I just want his parents to know how kind and compassionate your son was tonight. He made the stressed out mama pause for a moment and realize this is exactly what we parents are trying to do, raise great human beings." She explained, and then she said, "Wyatt, do not let this world change your kind heart, young man, for it's people like you that will change this world for the better." Wyatt had shown Brittany such kindness. Now, do you think the story would end there?
Right.
No, it does not.
No, okay.
So, back to it.
Wyatt had shown Brittany such kindness. How to thank him even more? On hearing that he was saving up money to buy a car, Brittany began a GoFundMe campaign on his behalf.
Wow.
And raised $32,000 for him.
He got a Camaro.
And the story ends by saying, "How's that for gratuity?"
Yeah, honestly.
So both ways, this is a great thing. Of course, the kid, I mean, I'm sure this is probably a teenager struggling to make a little bit of money and going to school and you know, all the things that go with that. And he's like, he's just nice. He's kind.
Now, as a parent, would you want your kid to use that $32,000 to purchase a vehicle or go to school?
That's well, I'm wondering what kind of access he had to this money. Then,
right.
you know?
Right. At that age,
It's pretty cool, I guess.
Either way, a great gesture on both. For Wyatt for just paying for dinner for this family, and for Brittany for setting up this GoFundMe.
That's very cool.
And that's why they are our winners of the week, plural.
Plural.
That's how winning is done.
Yes, it is indeed. So I know we talked a couple of shows back. I'm trying to remember the context, and it probably really doesn't matter, so I won't bore you with it. But the subject of Freud came up, and I know he's come up quite often in the show. Partly because I'm a therapist and a hypnotist,
right,
and a psych major. So
why wouldn't Freud be in your
conversation?
Yeah, he would be in your vernacular, I would imagine.
So,
yeah.
and we also had mentioned psychoanalysis. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and not in some boring textbook way, because you know who would want to listen to that? That would be
boring.
But just wanted to give you some insight, and this clarification is going to be helpful for a lot of people, because I think there's a misunderstanding about exactly what psychoanalysis is, and then I'm going to say a second term, and they're kind of used interchangeably: psychotherapy.
Okay, that's
similar terms.
It's very similar, but they're very different mindsets as to how to go about helping someone.
So let me say that they're not interchangeable. That's even though they sound very similar. So psychotherapy is the umbrella of what we call talk therapy, which is what most therapists do nowadays, and in past days as well. People come in for therapy. They have an issue or they're not feeling well, whatever it is. They come in, they sit down, they talk with a therapist. That is psychotherapy. It's talk therapy where we figure out issues, resolve problems, help you get to where you want to be, set goals, all of those type of things.
Fair.
Psychoanalysis is a specific way of doing therapy. It's a specific approach that was invented by Sigmund Freud.
Okay. I'm going to learn something tonight, I know.
Yeah, absolutely. So psychoanalysis was developed, and I know we hit on this before, but it's always fun to hit on again, because Freud started in hypnosis.
I do remember you saying that, yeah.
He was not very good at it. So he ditched it.
Clean out your desk, you're gone.
And started with a new theory, which he coined the term psychoanalysis. So the definition, and I won't go into too long of a one, but it's a type of therapy that aims to release pent-up or repressed emotions and memories, or to lead the client to catharsis or healing. In other words, the goal of psychoanalysis is to bring out what exists in the unconscious or subconscious to your conscious awareness.
Okay. So it's like you're dreaming, but you know you're dreaming.
Yeah, kind of like our lucid dreaming episode.
Okay.
Yeah. So the whole point of psychoanalysis is to uncover repressed feelings, thoughts, memories, actions, whatever they are. And we know Freud was a bit of a nut. I mean, in general. Now, I will say this. He can be looked back on as kind of a caricature of himself. I mean the whole thing about psychoanalysis and people lying on a couch and Freud's his whole views on sexuality and Oedipus complex and all of that.
There was a few addictions in there.
It just seems a bit far out there. But the gist of what his psychoanalysis approaches is that we all are screwed up because of repressed or unconscious issues in our minds.
Okay.
And as far as that goes, I kind of agree with that. That a lot of us, and we go back to our last episode when we talked about empower yourself for success. We have these stories that we tell ourselves over and over again, and eventually they just become part of our thought process. We don't even have to try to do it. They're just there. They're just sitting in the background, just affecting us.
Without us even being aware.
Yeah, without you being aware of it.
It's banging on the...
Da-da-da-da like this in the background. What the fuck is it with you?
Yeah, and that's what that's sometimes what our minds do. So Freud's approach was psychoanalysis to uncover these hidden or these buried emotions or experiences or thoughts, so that you could purge them, and then you'd have catharsis, is what he would call it.
A release.
A release
Yes.
of that. And then you would be freed of those hindrances, of those weights from your past. So let me just give you a quick rundown on Freud. He was born in Austria, spent most of his childhood and adult life in Vienna. He entered medical school, and this is something I think I knew, but it refreshed me today. He actually trained to become a neurologist, earning a medical degree in 1881.
Wow. So
he was a neurologist. He became a doctor. Soon after his graduation, he set up a private practice and began treating patients with psychological disorders. So his attention was captured by a colleague of his with an intriguing experience with a patient. The colleague was Dr. Joseph Breuer, and his patient was the famous Anna O., who suffered from physical symptoms with no apparent physical cause. So those of you who've had Psych 101, you may have run across this or not. So in a concise statement, Anna O was a patient who had all these physical symptoms, but they couldn't find anything wrong with her.
Like fibromyalgia. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Or but things that are hard to detect that you wouldn't be able to prove.
Yeah.
And of course, we're talking back in
late
1800s.
Right.
So, diagnostics were not what they are now, of course.
Right.
So this Dr. Breuer, who was a colleague of Freud's, found that her symptoms went away when he helped her recover memories of a traumatic experience that she had repressed since childhood.
Oh, wow.
And then once he uncovered those for her, all of her physical symptoms disappeared.
She wasn't this stress wasn't there anymore.
Well, and I was going to say, and you could say that could be psychosomatic, but in a way, that's exactly what it was.
Right.
It was in her mind. Her mind was causing her body discomfort, and it was showing itself with all these physical symptoms.
Wow.
So think about this, listeners. How many of you out there have made yourself sick? And I use that in a general sense.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about from drinking.
It's quite pungent. Stings the nostrils.
I'm saying that, like, if you're worried about something so much that you get a headache, or you get nauseous, or maybe you'll throw up, or
you got to go talk in front of a bunch of people.
You have to go talk. Yeah. You have to do something that you're dreading. You're stressed about work, and you just hate going in, and you have these physical symptoms: headaches, neck aches, back aches, nausea, unable to eat, unable to sleep. That all comes from your mind, because that's where it's coming from. The stress is causing physical symptoms. So they were onto something here, because they realized, if we address the psychological part, the physical part goes away. So Freud really got interested in this case, and it influenced some of his most influential ideas. And he came up with the whole model of being three different categories, or three different compartments of your mind. He started calling it the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious. And for those of you who have any idea where this is going, it eventually developed into id, ego, and superego.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
I told you I was going to learn something tonight. Yeah.
Right. And these three, although they come from the same mind, they're different sections of the mind. So, I don't want to bore you guys with this, but you probably know what they are. The id is the selfish, instinctual, I want what I want, I'm going to get it. There's no governing the id.
Okay.
It's just survival and gratification.
It's all
is
about
what the id is.
All
it's
about
all
me.
about me.
Yeah.
Yep. So we would say a narcissist probably has a brain that's totally id, because it's totally about them.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's me on a daily basis. Ask my wife; she'll tell you.
What are you doing?
So the second part is the ego. Now, the ego is like a check-in on the id. It works to kind of meet the id's needs, but it modifies it so it's socially appropriate. So let's say, and I'll just come up with a just crazy example. Somebody's starving. So the id would just go steal food from someone,
Right.
because they're hungry. The ego would keep that in check and say, yes, you need to eat, but we have to do it in a certain way that's not going to cause a problem. And then the superego are the higher principles of morality in socially and moral acceptable behaviors,
Okay.
which would be like altruistic, or the idea that kindness is very important, and probably where a lot of religious beliefs come in. It's your standard. It's your doctrine that you live by.
Okay.
Your deeper belief system. Freud also developed what we term defense mechanisms, and this is probably something common that you've heard before. Repression, pushing disturbing or threatening thoughts out of your consciousness. So you don't want to think about an experience you had as a childhood, so you just push it away.
Bury it.
Yeah, you bury it. Denial, of course, is a big one. We know a lot of people that are in denial about a lot of things.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Zero idea.
What happened?
Yeah. Projection, and that projection is when you might be a dick and you just you project that onto other people. You're like, oh, why is that guy such a dick? You're the one that's
right.
Yeah. So projection is blaming, like looking at that your fault in other people that you can pick out very readily.
That's me driving. So
Yes, that's probably a good place for it. Displacement is a common one, especially in relationships. Displacement is when you take out your frustrations on somebody instead of the person it should be directed at.
right.
Let's say you're in a terrible job. You come home and you take it out on your wife because
Right.
your boss is an idiot.
Right.
That would be displacement. And regression is a defense mechanism where you move backward in development to cope with stress. So let's say you're overwhelmed with something and you regress into childlike behaviors,
Okay.
tantrums, crying,
Whew.
just pouting.
Yeah, I thought that was putting walls up. What regression was, but it's not. It's
Yeah,
not.
It's just regressing back to that childlike behavior when you don't get something that you want or need.
Gotcha. You're
Yeah.
18 again, and you're stomping your feet because you didn't get the car for the night. Yeah.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
That's
Yeah,
it.
that's it. And this one is sublimation. Now, sublimation is not as destructive because what that is you satisfy an impulse by acting on it in a different way. So say you're angry at your wife. Happens sometimes.
Why is it going to be the wife? Why can't
Well,
why can't it
say
be
the wife's
husband?
angry at the husband. Either way. Or you're angry at someone. So instead of addressing it with that person, maybe you go downstairs and you work out for an hour. You focus that aggression to a different but appropriate.
Right. And
place.
that can be somewhat healthy.
Oh no,
at the
that
same time.
definitely that is definitely healthier than. Now the only thing it doesn't do is it doesn't resolve the issue that's still underlying.
Correct.
It does help you cope with it, and it helps you expel that negative energy, but it never resolves the issue in the first place.
Right. It's like trying to answer an email emotionally. Sit on it.
Yes.
Sit on that
Yes.
for a night.
Don't send it too quick.
Clean out your desk. Goes on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And then, of course, the thing that most people make fun of Freud for, or I wouldn't say make fun of him, but the big thing when it comes to sexual issues, because let's face it, he was out there sometimes, but that's where the whole 5 stages of development come: oral, anal, phallic, latency, genital. And he believes that the whole stages of development are stuck and focused on sexual stages in life.
Wow. I had no idea. I told you I was going to
Really?
learn something. Yeah,
Okay.
I had no idea about
well,
that part.
And again, I'm trying not to be too clinical or textbook on this because I mean, because I'm a psych major, I sometimes assume that most people would know a lot of these things. So the 5 stages, now I'll just go through them.
I know of the 5 stages. I just don't know how it came to be.
Oh, yeah.
So just clarifying.
So, and I'll try to go through it as I'm trying to think of a good word for it, as PC as I can.
Sure.
So the first stage is oral, when a child's a baby. It seeks pleasure from the mouth, sucking on a bottle, pacifier, thumb.
Breastfeeding.
Yeah. Yep. Second stage moves into anal, where we go into potty training.
Okay.
And again, he described it as the child seeks pleasure from the anus. I don't think that's quite the terminology that we would use, but that's how Freud put it. But the whole point is that the child's learning about bodily functions, urinating, defecating, going to the bathroom, that whole process.
Right.
Then it comes into the third stage is the phallic stage. That's when the child becomes aware of genitalia and that they have it and what does it do?
Right.
That's the curiosity. Like, you know the babies that don't know that you shouldn't be just grabbing yourself when you're in school.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I don't think my son's listening, but we used to call him the penis toucher when he was like 4, 3, somewhere in there. But
yeah,
he just constantly would just be
grabbing at him,
just be pulling it or adjusting it. And sometimes it was at school, sometimes it was in front of people. It didn't matter.
Right.
You just
they're developing. That's a natural form of development.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And people worry about it, even as parents. I was kind of aware, and I women can tend to be more judgmental about this.
What happened?
But and again, as a therapist and knowing what I do, it's natural because I have a lot of parents that come into my office with small children and say, "Oh, should I be worried because he or she's touching himself a lot?" And I'm like, "No, that's normal. That's this normal stage of development where there's discovery and you're figuring out what you have." Yep. The fourth stage is the latent stage, which it gets past the awareness of their genitalia, and there's like little or no sexual motivation. It's like this. Well, it's called latency. You're just in a period of where that doesn't come into play.
Girls are gross,
and that's late.
Boys are yucky.
Yes,
Yeah.
like late before 10, like ages 6 to 10, 11.
Yep.
Then puberty hits.
Oh,
And
girls.
that's when everything changes, and from that point on, you're in the genital stage.
Oh, John Stamos.
Where everything's based on, well, not everything, but according to Freud, from puberty on, everything you do is in response to what genital pleasure you're going to get out of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Motivations, even jobs. It's all like the satisfaction of this underlying sexual desire.
Gotcha. Wow.
At least that's how Freud thought.
The fourth time I'm going to say it. I learned something tonight.
That's good.
Can I try it really quick?
Go for it.
And then another famous thing that Freud was known for was, again, dream interpretation. He believed the subconscious mind holds all your secrets, it holds all your issues. Therefore, because your subconscious mind is active when you're dreaming, that needs to be analyzed because there's answers there. So let's say you have a dream that you're riding a pink donkey at your grandma's house when you were 5. It sounds crazy and bizarre.
Kind of does.
But for Freud, that means something.
I'm having Happy Gilmore flashbacks.
Right? I thought about that too. Because think about how kind of messed up your dreams are. It's like it's just like, where did that come from?
Oh, great Odin's raven.
And that's why your dreams are so screwed up, because it's all jumbled subconscious thoughts that are just random, hooked together. And of course, Freud's famous book, The Interpretation of Dreams, was published in 1900. And again, the whole point there is that your dreams can give you insight into your condition as a human being.
Okay.
If you study them. And of course, that's where all of the dream interpretation, meanings of things, what does it mean if I'm, again, a couple of common dreams. I'm naked in front of a crowd of people.
Right.
Or I have a dream that my teeth are falling out. Some of these. And Freud, through study and through interviewing people, attached meaning to each of these things on what it would mean.
That's a lot of people to listen to.
Right. Well, and I don't know, and I can honestly say I don't know the extent of that research and if it was even could be classified as accurate research.
Okay.
You know, I don't know if there were standard deviations. I don't know if it was a raw or a random group, which are all needed for studies.
Right.
But that was his view.
Gotcha.
So now the big thing is all of this plays into psychoanalysis, finally, because that's what we're kind of talking about, Freud and psychoanalysis. So the old cliche of somebody lying on a couch and the therapist sitting behind them and writing, that is how psychoanalysis works. You lie down on a couch. You don't face the therapist. You don't even look at them, because the whole point that they're trying to do is say that they don't want to have anything interfere or influence what you talk about.
Gotcha.
And if I'm talking with someone, of course, when you meet someone for the first time, and I see this in therapy all the time, and it's kind of a running thing that most therapists will understand this when I say it. The first issue that someone tells you about is not the real issue.
No, it's not.
Never usually is.
No. There's always underlying something.
There's this test run. It's just, I'm going to see how if I'm respected or if I'm supported, if I'm understood, if
I'm
there's
shopping
empathy.
for the right person.
Right, exactly. And I believe people out there, if you're going to see a therapist, you need to find the right person. And I say this to clients when they come in to see me for the first time. I say it just like this. I'm like, listen, after this first session, you might not feel comfortable with me. You might just think I'm an a-hole. It doesn't matter. If you're not comfortable, this is not going to work for you. And I always tell them up front, you have the power to choose who you want to.
Right.
Now, that could possibly go far the other way, where you get a therapist that's enabling and somebody wants this constant attention and they want a therapist that's going to cross boundaries. And by boundaries, I mean
answering the phone at 3 a.m.
Yes, being available at any time that they want, because now you're enabling the client to be dependent.
Right.
And that's not what you want. My whole goal with this therapist is to get somebody to independence.
Right.
Not to have them depend on me, because that is totally, that's totally not cool.
I'm catching on, Dave.
Yes. So you lie on a couch, the therapist sits behind you, and then you just talk. It doesn't matter. And there are tools to initiate conversations, but there's not this back and forth conversation that goes on. Some of the tools that they use are the Rorschach test, the ink blots. That's a part of psychoanalysis.
Okay.
What do you see in this?
A cloud.
And because of your answer, that'll show how you're thinking, even though there's no right or wrong answer.
A bat.
And the Rorschach tests are just they're just blots of ink.
Boobs.
They're not meant to be anything. Yeah. Well, but yeah. And then Freud would say you're repressing some sexual tendencies of some type. Yeah.
You're welcome.
It's pretty cool, I guess.
The whole term Freudian slip.
Yeah.
When people say something that they don't mean, or they say it it just comes out wrong. Freud believes that's what you really meant to say. Because that's what your subconscious mind took over, and you just kind of let that happen.
Yeah.
And then the free association is the whole thing of just talking and just let your mind go. And I think we've compared this in the past to brainstorming, where you just keep talking. Yeah, I grew up in this city, and my mom was like this, and she used to make muffins, and then I never liked the muffins, but then she started making something else, and then I remember when I had the muffins, I used to be able to go outside and play with Jimmy, and then Jimmy hit me one time. It's just it can go anywhere.
Free association equals digression on a massive scale.
Right. It's just saying what comes to your mind, and wherever it leads. Now, with psychoanalysis, now if I were the therapist, now I have to put all this together and see what it all means. It's like a puzzle.
Right.
Like, well, it's funny though. You said your mom made muffins and then Jimmy hit you, and now you don't like muffins.
Right. You just solved.
You just connected those two things because they were connected in that incident. So that's a very simplistic example. full psychoanalysis, if you were to do it the traditional way like Freud does, on average takes 5 to 7 years to go through a whole analysis. And that's with clients coming 3 times a week.
Wow.
So long story short, that is the story of psychoanalysis. Now you see why, as a therapeutic approach, that would never work today.
No, it wouldn't.
I'm not saying it couldn't work, and I think there are times where you take parts of this, and I believe this also, people. All therapists are eclectic in their approaches because other than psychoanalysis, there are, I can name right off the top of my head, 10 other approaches to therapy. And I don't think anybody ever follows just one approach. I think most therapists are eclectic and they use what they can. So there are times you might be able to use psychoanalysis as like, oh, you know, you just mentioned your mom and you got really angry. What's the deal there? You're picking up on these unknown emotions or these subconscious emotions.
Because this type of analysis, and you can kind of cherry pick from the different types of analyses to really help your patient, because everybody is different.
Yes, everybody's different. Just as some people learn better, you know, auditory, visual, hands-on. People are the same, so you have to be eclectic at some point because you have to use what. But it is good that you have a therapist that knows a lot of approaches, because somebody who just takes one approach and doesn't use anything else,
cookie cutter,
that would be limited. Yes, cookie cutter is a great way to put it, and that doesn't work for everyone.
No.
So that, people, is psychoanalysis in a nutshell. And I hope it wasn't too boring for you, but I might hit on some other approaches too, if you're ever looking or you're ever wondering what happens in therapy, because there are tons of different approaches and ways to do things. So don't forget, look in the show notes. There's the free Hypnosis for Insomnia download that's available to you. And until next time, change your thinking, change your life, laugh hard, run fast, be kind. I'll see you next time.